So persons, I realize just about 3 4 persons actually online, but I'm still going to actually start. Those persons, they will actually have to pick up when they join the class or replay the video recording. Right. So after looking at characteristics of living things, then we would have gone to look at cells. So now we'll be looking at how substances move across cell membrane. Now, of course, the cell membrane, it is that outer border that actually protect the inner components or the inner cell organs from the surrounding of that particular cell, for example. Now, in terms of how substances enter and leave the cells, we actually have 3 different ways, and those 3 ways are diffusion, osmosis, and of course active transport. So definitely we will be looking at them individually. Right, so we're gonna actually start with that subheading which said movement of substances. So what they're saying, as for this first pointer, cells need to move different substances into and out of the cell in order to function properly. So what they are saying, in order for a normal body cell to carry out its function or do what it is designated to actually do, then definitely there are some different things that must always be inside the cell, and of course some things that of course should be outside based on the amount of production or the secretion of it that would have take place as a result of some cellular activity. So the 3 processes are diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. And these are 3 processes by which actually take place within the cell in terms of moving substances in and out. Moving on, looking at diffusion first. So diffusion, the movement of molecules from a region where they are in higher concentration to a region where they are in lower concentration. Now, on the slide you will see basically an image, and the image actually illustrating that diffusion is taking place. Now, before we look at the image, there are some terms that we need to know the definition or what they are talking about when they use these terms. Now, this term that is known as higher concentration, it basically mean that the substance will be moving from a place where there's a lot in terms of that particular substance to a region where they are in lower concentration. It mean to a area where there is small amount. Now, the image now is actually showing a crystal that is known as potassium manganate. Now, it actually have a purple color. Now, we have some of them at the school in the science lab. So if it was a face-to-face class, then we would have do the simple experiment just to give you an idea as to how the process of diffusion actually take place. Now, to your extreme left, that is the glass to the extreme left, you'll realize that it is crystal clear in terms of the water. Now they are showing it down the bottom where they are saying that this particular potassium, it would have just been placed in it. Now look at the middle one now. It actually start to spread out gradually. Now the fact that right there is actually where the potassium was placed. This would now be the place of high concentration for that potassium, while in the rest of the glass where it have not spread there as yet, you would say that those are the place of low concentration. And low concentration again mean that you don't have a lot of that particle within that particular region. Long as time progress, you're actually gonna have the crystal moving from the place of high concentration and going into the areas where it is actually in lower concentration. Now this will now take place until what is known as equilibrium is reached. What do we mean by equilibrium in terms of diffusion? We basically mean that the substance that is being diffused, it will now equally distributed within that particular container. So the image to the extreme right, as you can see, it is well uniform now. As you can see, the entire glass with the water, it actually have a purplish color evenly, so everything basically look the same. That is what is known as equilibrium. So equilibrium mean that the end all of the water have basically the same color. So if you look to the side, if you look to the right side and look to the left side, you realize that they are the same in terms of the color shaded. Now at home, to do this experiment, if the fact that you wouldn't have the potassium crystal, you can simply fill a glass with water and you can use pen ink. That is that same pen that you use to write. So what you can do now, you basically drop some of the ink in the water, like in the middle of the glass, and you will actually observe it and you will actually see gradually that the water is actually changing to that color of ink. So let's say for example is a black ink you use, then gradually as time progresses, after you put that black ink in the middle of the glass, then after a few minutes, then the entire glass will get black in terms of the watercolor. Now whenever you're using the pen ink, the exact spot in the glass where you first drop that pen ink, that would be the place of higher concentration, and that is simply because that's where you will find most of the ink. So when we're looking at diffusion and we're using the term higher concentration and lower concentration, we're basically talking about where have a lot of that particular substance and where have a small amount. So the area where you have a lot of that substance, that would be the place of high concentration. And the section where you have a small amount, that would be the place of lower concentration for that particular substance. So the second point I is saying all substances are made of particles. So it is these small particles that normally collide with each other. That means them bounce against each other. What randomly, and that is how they will now evenly spread out within that particular container. Now, first pointer on the slides, in gases and liquid, these particles move around randomly. That simply means they might move to the left, move up, move backward. So there's no uniform way of them moving. That once they collide with another particle, they actually just try to find a free space for themselves. Diffusion take place when particles are not evenly distributed. So eventually the particles will spread out evenly, and that is what is known as equilibrium is reached. Now down the bottom of this slide we have some boxes there. Now we're going to focus on them. Now we're going to actually start to the one at the extreme left, where they are saying at the moment when the blue particles are added to the red particles, they are not mixed at all. So that bottom right corner, if I should ask you for the first box there, that where is the place of high concentration for the blue particles, then you should tell me that it is actually in the bottom right corner. Why that is a place of high concentration for the blue particles is simply because that's where you have a lot, or that's where you have most of the blue particles. Now, diffusion will only take place whenever there is inequality of a particular substance. That simply means that if equilibrium is not reached, then diffusion not going to take place. That's all they are saying. So moving to the second box now, what it is showing is that the blue particles, what is taking place is that they are now starting to move randomly, and the fact that they are moving randomly, meaning that they are colliding against each other. Now, once one of the blue particle bunks on next particle, it will actually try to move into a free space. They normally say that it actually try to find its personal space. So once it finds its personal space, then the movement basically stop. So if you're comparing the first box versus the second one, you will realize that as for the second one, the blue particles now start to spread out. And as I go to the third one, they are saying as the particles move and spread out, they bump into each other. This helps them to keep spreading randomly. So as you can see, as for the third box now, they are trying to spread out more in the entire box. So the objective or the goal is for the blue particles to actually evenly distribute themselves within the box there. And the fourth box now, eventually the particles are completely mixed and diffusion is complete. So when you look at the fourth box, you will realize that it is now, it basically look uniform. It actually look equally spread out in terms of the particles them. So this is when diffusion normally top. Now, in any scenario, once we are talking about diffusion, diffusion will always take place once there is an inequality. That means that you have too much of a particular substance at one particular section of that container. Once there's inequality, then diffusion will be taking place. Now, diffusion only stop when what is known as equilibrium is reached. And in the fourth box, we can now say that yes, equilibrium is reached, because when you look at the dots or the particles, whether blue or the brownish color one, you will realize that all the dots, they are evenly distributed through the entire box. So if you compare the fourth box to the first one, you will realize that for the first one, all the blue dot particles, they are actually in at one side of or at one corner of the box there. So in order for it to spread out evenly, then diffusion now need to take place. In a real life situation, for example, at home, I can give you a practical example now. Let's say, for example, somebody is in the kitchen cooking, and you're actually in the living room or wherever within the house you are. In terms of the scent that is coming from the pot. So let's say, for example, some meat are cooked down or some fish are fried. Then you know that those type of food, they give off a lot of scent in terms of smell. Now in the kitchen, right where the pot is, or in the pot, that would be the place of higher concentration for the scent of that food that is cooking. Now the reason why within the pot there are and the stove there will be the place of high concentration for the scent that is coming from the pot is simply because that's where you will actually smell it the strongest. Let's say, for example, you're in the living room now, and you actually this has barely start to smell it. That means that diffusion is now taking place where the scent that is coming from the pot, it is now trying to spread out evenly within the house. And that is whenever that is now diffusion now taking place. So in terms of explanation, anything that give off scent and you start to smell it, then those are examples that you can use to describe or explain diffusion. And next real life scenario. Let's say, for example, you're in class and the teacher teaching, you're attentive to what is going on in the class. All of a sudden, you hear somebody ease them body, what we call poop. Now, close to the person that would have eased their body, in terms of the scent that that actually come from that person will be the place of high concentration, because that's where you will actually smell it the strongest. So if the person is sitting at the back of the class, the persons that are sitting in the middle of the class, they will smell it before or quicker than the person who is sitting at the front. That is simply because diffusion is a process where it actually gradually takes place, where the substance or the scent start to spread from where it is of higher concentration to the place where it is of lower concentration. So as time progresses, the entire class now will eventually smell it, but the entire class not going to smell it at the same time, because remember that it is gas, and diffusion is taking place. So there is a movement that is taking place where the particles that comes from the particles within the scent, they are colliding against each other and actually trying to spread themselves evenly through the entire room. And once the scent spread evenly through the entire room, then that is when we would actually say that equilibrium is actually reached. So when I said that equilibrium is reached in relation to diffusion, we're basically saying that all the particles or all the substances that is being diffused, they are evenly distributed within that particular space. All right, so the first pointer here, particles move along a concentration gradient. Now we're going to use this diagram. We're going to use another diagram now to explain. Now, what is a concentration gradient? Now, a concentration gradient is normally the difference between the section that is of higher concentration and the section of lower concentration. Now, the further it is in terms of the amount of particles on a particular side, the higher the concentration gradient. Now, let's look at the first box there. So in terms of the green dots are those green molecules on the left side of this box where you're seeing all of them, this would be a place of high concentration for those green box. While to the right where there's none of where there's no dots, this would be the place of lowest or lower concentration for those green particles. So all three diagrams showing green particles is, so we're going to actually use these three diagrams to try to understand what is known as the concentration gradient. Now, if we should count all the dots, so let's say I'm going to count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So we actually have 13 green dots on this side. I'm looking at the middle box. So we have 13 green dots on the left side, while on the right side we have just 4. So if we are comparing the second box versus the first one, I'm going to count how much on the left side for the first one. We have 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. So we have 16 green dots on this side, while on the right side we have 0, we have none. So that's a difference of 16. Now looking at the second box, now we have 13 on this side and we have 4 on the right side. Now the difference between 13 and 4 is 9. And so the difference for the second box is 9 and the difference for the first box is 16. So if I give you this and I'm going to test with these two boxes, now the question I will ask you is for you to tell me which of these two boxes of the highest concentration gradient. So again the question is, which of these two boxes of the highest concentration gradient? Now the correct answer would be the first box, because it have a larger number in terms of the difference. Because remember, on the left side we have 16 dots, while on the right side we have 0. So that's a difference of 16. And as for the second box, as for the left side, we have 13 dots, and on the right side we have 4. So that will give you a difference of 9. So so the more imbalance, the more imbalance the substance is, where it actually most of it on one side and you have a small amount on the other side. So the more imbalance it is, or the larger the difference, it is the greater or the steeper of what is known as concentration gradient. So the second point I saying, the bigger the difference in concentration between two regions, the steeper the concentration gradient. So they are referring to the diagrams down here. If we should compare these two, the first two boxes. So again, look at the pointer. The greater the difference, because remember, after I did work out the maths, I said that the difference for the first box is 16 and the difference for the second box is 9. And the pointer is saying that the bigger the difference in concentration between two regions, the steeper the concentration gradient. Right. So in terms of comparing again, we can compare the box in the middle and the box to your extreme right. So we already know the difference between these two boxes here, which is 9. So let's count the dots to the box on the right now. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on the left side, and we have 8 on the right side. So what is happening for this last box now? No diffusion is taking place because there's no difference, because we have 8 on the left side and we have 8 on the right side. So that simply means that the particles, they are evenly distributed within this entire box. So no diffusion will take place, because once there's equilibrium or once there's equality, then you're not going to find that process of diffusion taking place. Now